Hey guys, and welcome back to another video, another episode of 5 things that we learned with a slight twist this time. Of course, this season has paused, so I thought I would take this opportunity to look at 5 things that we'd learned from the 2022-2023 season so far, because it has been an eye-opening, interesting, and relatively kind of mixed, but it's mainly good, but mixed start from Manchester City so far. I would also like to say, please do and download OneFootball right now. It's a fantastic app ahead of the World Cup as well. It's the place that you need to go to get all the stats, information, squad breakdowns, and all the World Cup news as it happens. And you can download it for the big price of absolutely nothing. It is free, it does help support my channel, and it will nourish your football knowledge. So what are you waiting for? Don't be a fool. Download OneFootball right now. Click that link in the description. Help support my channel a little bit and be a very good person. Do it right now. So yeah, this episode, there's loads of things to talk about. I'm sure you're watching this already going, why has he not talked about him? Why has he not talked about that? And why has he not talked about this and that and whatever? I could do 10 things you learned, I reckon, but then I'd just be talking about the whole thing so far. And it sort of defeats the purpose and format of this. But these are the 5 things that particularly stood out to me. They all seem a little bit moany, and they're not meant to be. Actually, a couple are positive, but they do seem a bit moany, but it's more that you notice the flaws after you've gone through the positives, There are positives to talk about, which I'll get on the end of the video, that I'll tack onto the end, that aren't brought up initially, aren't in the 5 things, but usually at this point of the season, I suspect Guardiola and the players will be using this as a chance to reflect a little bit, and this is what this is. Reflect on some of the issues and see where we're going wrong or where we're going right. I'm going to start with a very big positive. I just put clinical City. That is the one thing that we've learned from this season so far, in my opinion, that makes Manchester City a very different kettle of fish to the City that finished last season. Of course, Sterling and Jesus moved on, which may create some problems of its own, but we did replace him in the forward line with Julian Alvarez, of course, the little matter of the giant 𝐿𝐼𝐸 Haaland, and those two have added so many goals and so much brilliance to Manchester City's forward line that it'd be remiss of me not to talk about it. They really have changed what City bring to the table going forward, and it does change what Manchester City are about, particularly and most notably maybe in the Champions League or those knockout competitions where games get tight and the whole competition can just literally change just like that on one moment, one big chance missed, which Man City have been guilty of in the past with people like Jesus and Sterling, unfortunately, often culpable of missing big chances which cost City. And now we've got Haaland, who absolutely thrives on that chaos in the area and half chances and the tap-ins which City missed. And Julian Alvarez as well has already shown that he can finish a lot like Sergio Aguero at times and be absolutely fearless. It really is notable that this City side doesn't struggle to score goals. We always scored goals in the past, but we take less chances to score goals now. And I do usually feel, other than maybe the Brentford game, the odd exception, that we are going to create enough chances that Haaland and Alvarez will take most of them. Foden scored some goals as well this season, And of course, even though not everyone has kind of stepped up to the mark yet, I do feel like this City side doesn't really have goal-scoring issues, It's weird to say that a City side that scored so many goals had goal-scoring issues, but it just did. It just often did when it mattered. We usually got away with it, but I don't feel like it's going to be an issue now, and that could do a massive favour. The second thing that we learned is that maybe it's something that many people said going into the season, and I still think ultimately it might not affect us this season. That's what I said in my season preview. I talked about the wingers, and maybe it is an issue that we do need a winger. Doesn't mean it's going to affect us, but we could get away with it in the way that we got away with lacking a striker for 2 years. But I think it's pretty obvious now that we played a whole bunch of games that this City side does lack some natural width. If you look at how Manchester City play often, there's only really one natural winger, Riyad Mahrez. Other than that, we've got a whole bunch of players who want to play through the middle. Phil Foden wants to be a midfielder. Bernardo Silva is a midfielder. And Jack Grealish wants to be central, drifting through the middle. He can play as a left winger, but only the left winger that gets the freedom of the pitch and becomes central. Sort of, like a roaming creative playmaker. He's not a traditional winger in the sense that Manchester City have been used to over the years. And I do think we lack some natural, pacey, old-fashioned wing play out wide. And you wonder what the solution is. Could it be that Man City will go big in the transfer market in the summer, the likes of Rafael Leao, the Georgian guy, it's Caradonna, I can't pronounce his name properly, had been linked to Mudryk, who looks a bit like Jack Grealish, but a lot more aggressive dribbler. Maybe we look at Carlos Borges or Daima Bude from the youth teams. I don't know what it is, but I do think we need something where the player out wide is absolutely that player. He is a winger and he's nothing else. And I think Man City are crying out for that, because it it feels like a lot like the false nine issue's been solved. We've got a striker, but now with Sterling gone, and even Jesus to an extent, we've got more kind of square pegs in round holes. And Foden can play out wide, but I still don't think he's a natural winger by any stretch. He's just competent and very good at it, but he's not excellent at it at times, and I want more than that. Also, as well, we do have that fullback issue still. Of course, it's been compounded by Kyle Walker not being available. If Walker hadn't been injured, I think there's a good chance he probably aren't raising this point. But the fact that he is injured shows that we're only really one senior injury away from having this potential issue. John Stones has been perfectly fine as a stand-in. Akanji looked all right at times. And Rico Lewis shows an awful lot of promise. But I think it's fair to say that Rico Lewis isn't going to start in a big game anytime soon under Guardiola. He's still very young, and he would also be a little bit unfair to lean on him too much, because many a young player has been crushed by the weight of expectations on their slight shoulders far too early. So I wouldn't want Rico Lewis to be thrown into the deep end too much. What Guardiola's doing right now is absolutely right, in my humble opinion, but it does show that we are probably still lacking a natural left back, you know. Sergio Gomez, of course, has been brought in, but he still looks very much like a work in progress. He could get there, and I do think he's got very obvious natural talent, but it looks like we've got Zinchenko back when Zinchenko signed, a guy who's trying to learn the role. Not Zinchenko 3-4 years later, who eventually got there, but a guy right at the start of his fullback career who's trying to learn how to be something that he's not instinctively. And of course, I think that shows, because Cancelo, his form has been very hit and miss, and I don't think we're getting anything creatively from Stones or Akanji when they play right back in the absence of Kyle Walker. He wasn't getting much creatively in the first place either. So I do think City just need a damn fucking good world-class left back to really push it on. 𝐿𝐴 has had a poor time at Chelsea, but I do actually believe would have been much better at City, because I do appreciate the consistency and the environment that Guardiola creates for these players, and they're always going to be much better than they are when they flop elsewhere, in my personal opinion. We've also got a really weird centre-back rotation thing going on. I don't know yet if it's an issue, but to me, I'm old school. I understand this is how it's got to be, because we've got a whole bunch of quality centre-backs. Five centre-backs that we learned there. You could just do a whole video about them. But I do feel that having this many centre-backs, look, I feel like with centre-backs, they are very much the sum total of the sum of their parts. What's the saying you know what I'm on about? I do feel like the more they know each other, it's like a brothership between centre-backs, because they are always pretty much a pairing. You know, of course, there's the odd exception when you play three at the back. But I would feel like out of all the positions on the pitch, in football, the thing that hasn't changed much is the centre-back pairing. It's pretty much consistent across the sport and has been for generations. Midfield partnerships have changed and so on, and strikers have become one man, and wingers have changed in the roles. But there's still, in 95% of teams, a centre-back pairing. And it's an old-fashioned thing. And I do feel like the way that City have approached it this season, in one game it's Ake, one game it's Laporte, one game it's Diaz, and then Akanji and Stones. And there's a lot of rotation there. I don't really feel like they're getting a chance to bond, and I understand why Guardiola does it, and I think he has to do it to an extent to keep them all happy. But I am old-fashioned, and I just wish sometimes, you know, that we had it settled. I look back to Man City's best defensive partnership in years, which to me was when Stones and Diaz were playing together, and I looked how few goals we conceded. There was barely any goals, and we were solid, and those two got each other, and they were playing off each other's runs, and they just understood each other's game. How can you do that if you don't play often? I'm not moaning for the sake of it, and maybe it is something that is a necessary evil, but it is something that City are doing. It's a compromise, and compromises sometimes can be great, but they can also be a negative. And I think finally what we've learned is that this season is going to be a new challenge in many ways. You can interpret this in many, many ways. Maybe it's because the team that we're playing is so different right now with Haaland and Alvarez, and we've got all those issues that I've just talked about. Or maybe it's because Arsenal are quite literally a new challenge. You know, Liverpool do not look like the force that they were. They still could become that force. I'm not naive enough to think otherwise. But they are so far behind right now that I'd be surprised if they're going to go for the title. Stranger things happen, of course. You know, Chelsea, I don't think Chelsea, Spurs, the rest of them are showing anything to worry about. So it's Arsenal. And we don't know if Arsenal yet can actually maintain this. A lot of people say they could do. Maybe they can do. But I'm a pragmatist, you know, with these things. The reason not to trust Arsenal right now is simply because there's no reason to trust Arsenal. Not because they haven't got quality, just because history tells us that these teams that suddenly shoot up sometimes have a little bit of a spell where they struggle. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but logic dictates that there's still lessons to be learned about Arsenal's viability come the end of the season. Do not underestimate how it feels once the players have got back from the World Cup in those wintry cold months, and they're tired and they're fragmented, and you've got games coming thick and fast. You have one bad game, that gets in your head. You had 2 bad games, which quickly becomes 3. Then you recover, but that's 9 points which can swing just like that. So that's how football is. And then you get towards the title race at the end of the season, and that pressure does eat away at you. Look how great Liverpool were for ages, yet it still ate away at them a little bit, just enough for this City side to crawl it back. I'm not saying that's going to happen. City could lose it this year, but it's very obvious that Arsenal have got a lot of questions to answer, and so have City. Because I do think the new challenge for City this season is to work out a way to kind of get the fullback issue maybe sorted, or the winger issue, or the fact that, maybe the football hasn't been at its fluid best at times. I look at this City side now, and it still plays better football than pretty much everyone in the Premier League, but it isn't City at the very, very, very peak, in my personal opinion. It's a little bit cross it and hope, which is fine, but I do miss a little bit the ingenuity of the David Silva, Kevin De Bruyne, false eights era, where the football was a lot more intricate. There was triangles, there was balls in behind and cutbacks and so on, and a lot of use of the half spaces. We're not seeing that as much. So I think it's a new challenge for Guardiola, a new challenger, literally, and so on. And I think that's quite exciting, because I don't know if we're going to do it or not, but I do enjoy that this is a new challenge to Manchester City. And we'll see the players, as they usually do, to be fair to them, rise to this challenge. So they're the 5 things that I took about it. I want to talk about Kevin De Bruyne a little bit as well, how he could be at his peak. Foden's goal scoring is good. Cancelo's form's up and down every now and then. I also want to talk a little bit about how the youth players are getting a chance at the moment, which is very exciting. But I couldn't quite fit them all in, and there's loads of course points that I possibly missed. Do let me know down in the comments what you think that I've missed out so far. I could have also talked about Phillips being very important for the second half of the season, given Rodri's, he's played an awful lot of football, but I didn't. So there we go. Thanks for watching this video. Thanks to the Patreons. Download OneFootball right now, and I'll do some World Cup content. I think probably starting tomorrow actually on this channel, maybe with a City angle. Thank you. Love you all loads. In a bit.